Hello and welcome back for another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for ranked play in batch 1025. A lot of top champions are 4 and 5 cost champions, so a portion of today's list will be focused on them. That said, there's still a handful of lower cost units that are definitely worth playing. Let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video, and to start off the list, we have Yasuo coming in as the number 10 champion. As usual, the meta is really not favored towards one-cost champions, but Yasuo is an exception since he's a consistently strong champion early game. This position could be given to a few other one-cost units, but overall Yasuo is the one that earns it mainly because he's needed to play Duelist. While Duelists aren't exactly the best composition, they are still one of the stronger ones that you can play that doesn't rely on hitting late-game champions. All you need is a chosen Yasuo, 3-star him, and slap him in 6 Duelists, and you're on your way to a top 4. Beyond early game and playing in Duelist, you're rarely ever going to see Yasuo used, but that's okay since he provides plenty of power early on. That's all you can really ask for in a meta where one-cost champions really aren't that strong. Next up, we have Lulu coming in as the number 9 champion. Lulu snuck her way into the top of the early game champion list after they changed her in patch 1024. Basically, they fixed her wild growth to properly apply to any target already affected by it. That means she can keep a champion, or multiple champions if you have mage, alive for longer in a fight. Later on in the game, it's harder for Lulu to have as much of an impact, but early game she can really carry well. This is made even better by the buffs that Elderwood received, making Lulu with 3 Elderwoods one of the strongest openings that you can have. Beyond the early game, there's still a place for Lulu when playing Elderwoods, specifically when going for Veigar carry. She's also a fantastic item holder for aura items like Chalice or Zeke's, which helps keep her relevant the longer the game goes on. All in all, if you're looking for a way to buff up your early game, we recommend picking up and playing Lulu. And next we have the number 8 champion for today's list, Kindred. Kindred is all around one of the best early to mid-game champions. As a 3 cost, you may struggle in finding them early on, but as long as you have them during stage 3, you're going to be good. Basically, what makes Kindred so good is consistent high ability damage plus the healing reduction their ultimate applies. Another benefit to Kindred is they tend to stay alive a long time during a fight thanks to the leap effect of their ability. So if a pesky assassin jumps on them, they'll generally move away and live. Combine all of these factors along with being a good item holder, and you've got yourself a solid mid-game carry. The main downside to Kindred is that Spirit really isn't a trait right now, and Kindred only fits into compositions later on that use Hunter. Of course, that's not too big of a deal considering Warwick, Ashe, and Aphelios are all part of the meta. It's just difficult to justify running Kindred past stage 4 if you're finding a 4-cost carry to replace them, so you never really want to overly invest into Kindred. That said, they're still one of the best carries that you can play in the early game. Next is our first 5 cost of several on today's list, as we have Zilean coming in at number 7. As is typical of these lists, we've got to slot in at least one Mystic, and Zilean is definitely up there as one of the best for that trait. Cultist may not be too relevant late game, but Zilean should always have a home in any composition thanks to both Mystic and his ultimate just being really darn good. Oftentimes, Zilean is the main reason for a late game teamfight swinging in your favor, as handing out free Guardian Angel to your board is ridiculously good. He also holds on to aura items well, such as Chalice or Zeke's, as the extra stats help him a lot. Unfortunately, Zilean is a highly contested unit, so it can be difficult to 2-star him, which is really the only downside to playing him. Moving right along, we have Jhin coming in at number 6. While Hunters are definitely doing better than Sharpshooters overall, Jhin still remains one of the best physical damage backline carries. The fact is, he just outputs so much damage that it makes sense to pick him up even if you're not utilizing his traits. And even in that case, it's pretty easy to slot in a second Sharpshooter to boost his damage, or if you're lucky enough, find a chosen Sharpshooter Jhin. Another reason as to why Jhin is a worthwhile consideration for being your carry is Dusk. Dusk on its own would only apply a small increase to Jin's ability power. This is quite helpful considering it increases the damage of his force shot, but the best way to utilize Dusk with Jhin is using a spatula to turn him into a Dusk. Granted, this isn't going to be doable all the time since you need a spatula, but it's one of the best ways to add in Jhin as a carry. Dusk is one of the best synergies currently and is extremely flexible, so you can toss in a Dusk Jhin, pair him with a Vayne and a few other Dusk champions, and you'll do quite well. Back to another 5-cost champion, we have Kayn coming in as our number 5 champ. Kayn possibly deserves to be higher on the list considering how contested he is late game, but the main downside to Kayn is that his kit and traits don't really benefit the rest of your comp. The champions in the top 4 all bring additional benefits to your composition, whereas Kayn is basically just a damage dealer. With that said, Kayn does a tremendous amount of damage both in an AoE and to individual champions. His items are relatively flexible since blue Kayn adds a solid amount of damage, or if you have damage items already, you can go for red to heal him. Either way, Kayn is going to do a lot in team fights. As we get into our top 4, we want to reiterate that these next champions bring a lot of value to your board in multiple ways. To start off, let's talk about our number 4 champion, Warwick. Warwick may not be the destroyer of the meta like he has been in the past, but he's still a key component for a lot of comps. While both Divine and Brawler are useful tags for him, it's really being a Hunter that increases his overall value in the meta. The reason for that is due to his attack speed buff that he applies when scoring a takedown. That buff will be given to any champion sharing a trait with him, which is fantastic for Divine champions, but it really helps out Hunters, namely Ashe and Aphelios. Specifically because of the attack speed, there's been a rise in builds like Moonlight Aphelios. Of course, there is still good old Divine, but the fact is, Warwick adds a lot of value to multiple compositions even when he's not the carry. Our next champion coming in at number 3, Riven. Well, this really shouldn't be a surprise having Riven in the top 3 since Dusk is easily one of the best synergies in the game. Dusk gives compositions a lot of flexibility, and at the heart of that is Riven. Riven can be played as just a frontliner or a carry, and oh man, does she do both jobs quite well. The main reason Riven is so great is the fact that she is a frontline Dusk champion. In addition to that, she can give your board Keeper, which isn't as amazing late game, but is still useful nonetheless. A Riven complements a lot of compositions thanks to being a Dusk and having a flexible item pool. We're moving on now to the number 2 champion of today's list, Yone. Yone does a lot for the late game meta, partially because he dishes out a lot of damage, but also for being an Adept. Adept has really solidified itself as one of the best splash traits in the game, alongside Mystic of course. With only 3 champions, it's super easy to slot them into any comp, and Yone makes that even easier by being a really good 5-cost champ. Exile is also helpful for Yone since it keeps him alive longer. Long enough for him to cast his ability, which is going to easily snipe 1 or 2 champions. Unfortunately, there is a major downside to Yone, and that's the fact that he's really contested. Finding a 2-star Yone is hard to do, but if you can, enjoy your free top 4. And now for the number 1 champion of patch 1025, Shen. Honestly, we're shocked we haven't had Shen as the number 1 champion every single patch. Why? Because think about what almost every single player wants. Frontline, Adept, Mystic. Shen covers all of those aspects as just one champion, and on top of that has a form of CC while doing okay damage thanks to being a ninja. We've definitely robbed poor Shen of this slot too many times, but we're rectifying that this week. There's likely no other champion as heavily contested as Shen because he just fits so well into any comp. Literally every composition can, at some point, have Shen in and be better because of it. What other champion really has that much value that you can consistently find every game? Maybe a 5-cost like Zilean, but Zilean isn't always findable because he's a 5-cost. Shen, being a 4-cost, can be picked up as early as level 5. So yes, we're here to say without hesitation that Shen is the best champion of the meta and quite possibly the best champion of set 4 so far. That wraps it up for our top 10 champions of the current meta for patch 1025. But you already know that we're not done yet as we have a few honorable mentions to cover. First up is Veigar. Veigar has already returned as a viable carry for Elderwoods this patch, mainly thanks to the small buffs that Elderwood received. But he can struggle late game to do enough worthwhile damage before getting killed, so he doesn't quite earn a spot in the top 10. That said, if you can find an early enough Veigar and have good items for him, he's a force to be reckoned with. Next, let's talk about Aphelios. A lot of you may have wondered where Aphelios was and why he wasn't in the top 10 considering Moonlight Hunter is doing decently well in the meta. The largest reason for him being only an honorable mention is consistency. Aphelios needs good items, a Moonlight Chosen, and Warwick to do well. And beyond that, you want to have Aphelios 4, which is not easy to hit. Sure, early on in the game, you can get away with just having a 3-star Aphelios carry because of Moonlight, but once you're into stage 4, he can fall off real quick. In order to get the most out of him, you need to hit so many conditions, and that's just not a reliable way to play. With that said, if you do meet those conditions, he's a strong carry and definitely would be a contender to fight with Jhin as the top range DPS. And the last honorable mention we have for today is Teemo. It really was a toss-up between Teemo and Lulu for the top 10, but Lulu provided too much of an all-around benefit to give her spot over to Teemo. Teemo does deserve recognition though, as his damage is really good early on and only begins to fall off around stage 4. If you can secure an early Teemo 2, which is definitely doable, you should find yourself in a great position transitioning towards the mid game. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. Overall, the meta is in a great spot with a lot of champions being viable. Keep in mind as well that patch 10.25 is the last one for 2020, which means we'll have a couple extra weeks on it. This may mean that the meta continues to evolve, so keep an eye out on what high ELO players are playing. Let us know in the comment section below what champions you think deserve to be on the list that we may have missed. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.